Thorpe, Sam Cassell. They beating Jordan
Mario
and Pippen and them in the fact record. Jordan would have won 8 straight. He won 8 straight. There is no one on this planet that would ever look at Jordan and say that. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never be a three-point shooter.
In the never-ending storm over who truly sits atop basketball's throne, Stephen A. Smith doesn't just whisper his opinion. He erupts with a defense of Michael Jordan so sharp, so fiery, it doesn't just echo across the sports world, it slices through the noise like a blade. Every word, every sentence, hits with conviction. Not just statistics. Not just nostalgia. But a respect so raw it punches you right in the gut. Stephen A. reminds us, Jordan's crown was never about chasing numbers or crafting flashy highlight reels for clicks. It was about domination. It was about an influence so heavy, so overwhelming, that decades after he left the hardwood, the game itself still bends around his legacy. The sport hasn't moved past Michael Jordan. It's still orbiting him, and let's get this straight, this isn't some tired debate about different eras. It isn't lazy barbershop talk about pace of play, hand-checking, or whether the three-point line mattered more then or now. No. This is about why Jordan remains untouchable even when you line him up against today's most genetically gifted, hyper-trained, analytically optimized athletes. The world has evolved. The training has advanced. The science is sharper. But the bar is still Jordan, so here's what we're going to do. Piece by piece, moment by moment, we're going to unpack Stephen A.'s breakdown. We're going to dissect exactly why his words hit with the kind of force that silences rooms. And whether you bleed Jordan red or you swear by the new school stars, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why this argument refuses to die. Because this isn't just a debate anymore, it's a reckoning. And before we dive all the way in, let's get one thing clear. If you live for these no-holds-barred NBA battles, if you thrive on truth over fluff, then drop a like, hit subscribe, and brace yourself. Because Stephen A. isn't just making a case here. He's bringing a gavel down on the conversation. And how does he start? With something so deceptively simple, it almost sounds too basic to sting. He says, just look at Jordan. Then look at today's stars. That's it. A simple invitation. But it's a detonator. Because the moment you actually line him up, skill for skill, mentality for mentality, adaptability for adaptability, you realize this conversation isn't about rings or MVPs anymore. It's about survival. Stephen A.'s punchline? Jordan isn't a dusty relic trapped in the 90s. He isn't a highlight clip for history buffs. You drop him into 2025, and he's not just holding his own, he's still in the upper echelon. Still taking souls. Still ending seasons. His work ethic, his killer instinct, his obsession with winning, those things don't age. They dominate in any decade, against any opponent, under any set of rules. This isn't about discrediting today's stars, Giannis, Steph, LeBron, Jokic. They're all brilliant. They're all historic in their own way. But Jordan is different. His greatness isn't tied to nostalgia. It isn't dependent on VHS tapes or ESPN classic replays. It's tied to timeless qualities that would make him a nightmare in any era, any system, any generation.
Jordan, when you look at him, you look at today's generation of players. Nobody is taking anything away.
Stephen A. doesn't hide from the truth. He doesn't duck the obvious. He looks straight into the camera and says it plain, today's players are freakishly athletic. They're faster, stronger, more explosive. They've got verticals tested in labs, diets crafted by nutritionists, and skill sets shaped by a level of training science Michael Jordan never even sniffed. Nobody's denying that. Nobody's blind. The modern game has created bodies that look like they were designed in factories. But here's the kicker, and this is where Stephen A. plants his flag. Being more athletic doesn't automatically make you more dominant. It doesn't hand you historical supremacy. There's a canyon, a Grand Canyon, between raw physical tools and all-time greatness. You can run faster. You can jump higher. You can lift heavier. But if your mind isn't wired for the kill, if your instincts aren't razor-sharp, if you don't have the will to break your opponent every single night, then all that science, all that training, all that explosiveness is nothing but window dressing, and that's the difference. That's the line Stephen A. draws in the sand. Modern stars might match Jordan's hops. Some might even shoot from deeper. They might glide with the same flash. But they cannot, and this is the point, they cannot replicate the total package Jordan brought. They don't have his relentless drive. They don't have his surgical basketball IQ. They don't have that ruthless competitive wiring that allowed him to shred opponents the second the stakes rose. When the moment got heavy, when the air got tight, Jordan never folded. He elevated. He crushed. Stephen A. is clear. Today's NBA might be filled with physical marvels, but Jordan had something beyond that. He had the complete package. Not just speed. Not just hops. Not just skill. But the understanding of exactly how to weaponize every ounce of it. He didn't just play basketball. He dismantled you mentally, spiritually, emotionally. He didn't just win. He imposed his will until you believed you couldn't. That's the gap. And then Stephen A. takes a direct shot at one of the laziest narratives floating around, the myth that Jordan only dominated because he played in a weaker league. He flips it on its head. He says, hold on, wait a minute. Even if you handed Jordan today's nutrition, today's trainers, today's pace and space game, today's freedom of movement rules, you think he'd be worse? You think he wouldn't adapt? No, he'd thrive. He'd dissect defenses even faster. He'd weaponize the spacing. He'd score 40 without breaking a sweat because now you can't touch him. Stephen A.'s voice rises. This isn't about nostalgia. This isn't some misty-eyed story about the 90s. This is about principles that travel across time. Greatness that translates in any decade. You don't downgrade Beethoven because music has better speakers now. You don't diminish Muhammad Ali because modern boxers lift heavier weights. And you sure as hell don't dismiss Michael Jordan because the athletes around him didn't have cryo chambers and shooting machines.
Today's generation of players look better than they've ever been. They're faster, they're more athletic. They clearly can shoot better to some degree. At least some of them rather.
Then Stephen A. rips apart one of the most tired, overcooked myths in the entire GOAT debate, the claim that Michael Jordan wouldn't survive in today's three-point obsessed league. He doesn't dance around it. He doesn't hedge. He says it straight. Anybody who actually understands the game of basketball knows Michael Jordan could have been a lethal three-point shooter if that's what his era demanded. And he's right. Context matters. Back in the 90s, the mid-range was king. Attacking the rim was the currency of dominance. The three-point shot was a side dish, not the main course. Nobody was firing off 10 threes a night because it wasn't what teams prioritized. But here's where people get exposed for not knowing the game. Great players don't stay frozen in the rules of their era. They evolve with what the game asks of them. Look at LeBron. He wasn't a reliable shooter when he first came in. Over time, he adjusted. Look at Curry. He didn't just shoot better, he redefined how defenses play by stretching the floor further and further. The greats evolve. And Stephen A. makes it clear, if the modern game demanded threes, Michael Jordan would have locked himself in the gym until his three ball was a weapon of mass destruction. Because that's who he was. That's what killers do. They adapt, they sharpen, they master whatever it takes to win. Stephen A. leans in, his voice cutting through every weak debate. Don't freeze players in the amber of their era. That's the mistake casual fans make. They look back and assume Jordan would just walk into today's game with the exact same toolbox he had in '93. Wrong. The man who spent summers adding new moves, new counters, new angles, wouldn't suddenly stop evolving if the three-point line became the new throne. His obsessive competitiveness wouldn't have allowed it, and that's not speculation. That's documented history. This is the guy who added fadeaways when defenses started loading up. This is the guy who turned free throws into daggers when Hackey Jordan became a strategy. This is the guy who could not stand having a hole in his game. Imagine him staring at the modern NBA, where the three-point shot rules the court. You think he's just gonna shrug? No. He's in the gym, night after night, until it's money. Stephen A.'s point lands like a hammer. Stop acting like evolution skips the greatest of all time. Jordan didn't just play the game. He bent it, reshaped it, and forced everyone else to keep up. If today's weapon is the three ball, Jordan would have mastered it, because his DNA was built for domination, not excuses.
I would ever look at Jordan and say that. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never be a three-point shooter.
And then comes the real MIC drop moment, the kind of truth bomb that doesn't just win the debate, it ends it. Stephen A. leans forward and points out something so staggering, so undeniable, that the entire room has to pause. The NBA literally had to change its rules to try and slow Michael Jordan down. Let that sink in. Think about what that means. Most players adapt to the rules. They learn how to survive inside the framework the league gives them. But when one man is so overpowering, so unstoppable, that the league itself has to structurally tweak the game just to give everybody else a fighting chance, you're no longer just great. You're not just dominant. You're a problem that the rulebook itself couldn't ignore. Back in Jordan's era, the league restricted how defenses could overload against him. They adjusted defensive schemes and illegal defense rules specifically because isolating Jordan one-on-one was flat-out unfair. And here's the kicker, even after they tried to build walls around him, he still walked right through, still put up numbers, still buried teams under the weight of his will. Those changes weren't meant to make his life easier. They were meant to make his dominance survivable for everyone else. And yet, Jordan torched them anyway. Stephen A then delivers the contrast that burns. Look at today's stars. They benefit from hand-check bans, from spacing rules, from freedom of movement calls, everything tilted to open up offense and protect scorers. Jordan didn't get those luxuries. He played in a league where defenders could maul you, shove you, knock you to the floor, and the refs would swallow the whistle. And on top of that, the league still tweaked rules to stack the deck against him. That's why Stephen A says Jordan's dominance is simply untouchable. It wasn't manufactured by rule changes that favored him. It wasn't built in a lab of offensive freedom. It was forged in a cage match, in an era where the league literally tried to handicap him, and he still came out on top. That's not just dominance. That's something beyond it. That's legacy written in granite.
He could never, be a big guard and do what Kobe did. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never do what LeBron James did with the no hand.
When Stephen A says Jordan in isolation would destroy people in ripples, he's not reaching for poetry, he's spelling out psychological carnage in its rawest form. Isolation basketball isn't just another play call. It's the purest test of who you are as a competitor. No schemes. No screens. No systems to hide behind. Just you, a defender, and the truth. And in that truth, Jordan reigned like a merciless executioner. This wasn't just about scoring buckets. Jordan didn't just beat defenders in ISO situations. He dismantled them piece by piece. He'd size you up with those predator eyes, read your balance, expose your weakness, and then go straight for the jugular. By the time he was done, it wasn't just your stat line that was bruised, it was your confidence, your pride, sometimes even your belief that you belonged in the league. That's how lethal his isolation game was, and here's the chilling part. Jordan did this in the era of hand-checking, when defenders could grab, shove, and steer you with their bodies. This wasn't today's whistle-friendly, space-heavy game where ISO ball is often avoided. In the 80s and 90s, going one-on-one meant stepping into physical warfare. It was brutal, it was bloody, and Jordan didn't just survive it, he thrived in it. He welcomed the fight. He hunted the fight. He wanted you stripped bare, alone, with nowhere to hide. Contrast that with today's NBA. The modern game leans on pick and rolls, spacing, ball movement, and exploiting matchups without exposing players to that pure, gladiator-style combat. Stars look for switches, yes, but they rely on systems that minimize risk. Jordan, he wanted the opposite. He didn't want protection. He wanted confrontation. He wanted the weight of the battle squarely on his shoulders, and yours. And once he got you there, once the court cleared and it was just you versus him, the story was already over. The only question was whether he'd break you quickly, with a vicious drive and dunk, or slowly, with a series of mid-range daggers that chipped away at your spirit until you were done. Either way, the result was the same. Isolation was his kingdom, and in that kingdom, no one left whole.